Going dark in Call of Duty's 2019 reboot of Modern Warfare is an absolutely fantastic mission, allowing you more freedom than almost any other in the series. An argument could be made that it's not just one of the best in the game, but in the entire franchise, as you sneak into a private estate in Moldova under the cover of darkness. Having played it through once or twice again recently, it's lost none of its impact, and in this video, I want to talk a bit more about why it's such great fun. The level begins with some chit-chat between Captain Price and Sergeant Garrick as they head towards the estate of Modern Warfare's primary antagonist, General Barkov. However, by the time the pair arrive on the outskirts of his enormous compound, it quickly becomes clear that terrorist organisation Al-Qatala have beaten them to the punch.
Al-Qatala search party.
Hadir brought AQ.
They're still looking.
We're not too late then. Let's get Hadir before he starts a third world war in Barkov's basement. Stay close.
There's a reason this mission is called Going Dark, and that's because you're going to be spending the majority of your time weaving between the shadows. There are also levels earlier in the game's campaign which feel very similar in terms of tone and atmosphere: Clean House and the Wolf's Den. Clean House tasks you with clearing a London townhouse under the cover of darkness, while the beginning of the Wolf's Den is essentially Modern Warfare's very own Zero Dark 30 moment as you storm a terrorist compound at night looking for their leader, the Wolf. However, gameplay-wise, they are generally very scripted affairs, during which you're given little freedom and mostly follow a set path, and this is where Going Dark begins to deviate from both. It is an experience that takes a lot of its cues from Call of Duty 4's masterpiece of a mission, All Gillied Up, and its spiritual successor of sorts, Cliffhanger from Modern Warfare 2. All Gillied Up introduced the idea of being part of a duo sneaking deep behind enemy lines, and it remains one of the series' greatest triumphs, even if these days its heavy scripting might grate on some. Cliffhanger then took that concept and built on it. You still team up with a single fellow soldier, but after a brief introductory sequence, you're given a lot more agency in how you approach things. Based on Going Dark's early stages, you might expect similar to one or both of them.
Shoot the light. We'll use the dark for cover. Let's move.
Although the introduction of a trio of mechanics you'll need to take advantage of during its runtime might be enough to convince you that what's about to follow will be something quite different. You're introduced to all three in quick succession. As we've just seen, you can shoot out lights, and a light meter also appears on the left-hand side of the screen when you're wearing your night vision goggles, a visual indicator of how easily you can be seen. Then, shortly after, you're also tasked with killing the lights using a nearby fuse box. And that's it. In little more than a minute or two, you're given all the tools you need to succeed during the longer section which follows. There are also a couple of things I consider to be callbacks to All Gillied Up and or Cliffhanger here. If you choose to go in all guns blazing and kill the first group of guards, Price will respond appropriately, reprimanding you.
No sloppy cop.
Which, if you've played those other two levels, might feel familiar.
You take the one on the left. On three. 1, 2, 3. This is easier when you do some of the work. We won't get very far trying to shoot our way out of every situation. Move up.
And it's a similar story when coordinating to take down pairs of guards, another scene you might have laid eyes on before in All Gillied Up and Cliffhanger as well. Rappelling down into the estate is where things really get going. I want to mention two more similarities to Cliffhanger here, and then I promise I'll shut up about older missions. While exploring, Price will provide cover fire, shooting out lights and the like for you.
I've got this one. He's down.
Much like Soap does in Cliffhanger.
He's mine.
And both missions also include a truck moving through their respective main areas, extra obstacles to progression which add variety on top of simply shooting or sneaking past lots and lots of enemies. Exploring the compound is a brilliant experience. Your objective is easy enough to understand. You need to search 3 different buildings, each containing a hostage, in the hope that one of them will lead you to Hadir, a former ally who has since gone rogue, but how you do it and in what order is entirely up to you. And as mentioned, you do have those 3 secret weapons which will help you complete your mission. You can take out lights, you're able to easily see when you're visible and when you are not, and can use fuse boxes to cut the power to different locations, and you will need to use each if you're to remain undetected. Each location is its own challenge, which helps keep things fresh. The pool, I think, is the easiest of the 3. There aren't many guards you need to avoid outside the building, and even fewer inside, all of them distracted by their hostage. By far the hardest part is eliminating all of them quickly enough that the alarm isn't raised, yet I'd imagine most seasoned gamers won't have too hard a time doing that. Or you can use Molotovs, which I'm 99% sure are placed where they are to tempt you into doing something drastic. Given it's the easiest area to infiltrate, I do also wonder whether developer Infinity Ward tries to guide you there in a somewhat unconventional manner. A lot of games will often use subtle visual clues to highlight where you need to head next. They might, for example, use lighting, colours, or even sound to draw your attention to where you need to go. There is a light on your left as you begin scoping out the compound, but where in other games that might indicate where you need to go, in Going Dark you're trying to stay away from lights, and you may want to avoid drawing attention to yourself early on by shooting one, and so, at least for me, it felt most natural to head right towards the pool where I could remain completely concealed. I could be wrong, but it just seems like too much of a coincidence that I was naturally drawn towards the least testing of the 3 locations. Once the pool has been cleared, it quickly becomes apparent that the first hostage knows nothing.
My father.
Foot bastard's done in.
We still have to check the church and clock tower. Hadir could be there.
So we'll next head to the clock tower, and while we're on our way there, I think it's worth considering just how well this mission fits within Modern Warfare's campaign. Stealthier missions like All Giddied Up, Cliffhanger, or even those in other Call of Duty games like Liberation in World War II could be described as one-offs. They are all great, but they work as well as they do in part because there's something different from most of the other missions in their respective titles. I don't think you can say the same of Going Dark. In fact, I think it fits far better into its own game than any of those I've just described. Earlier, I said that Clean House and the Wolf's Den are quite similar in some respects to Going Dark, and that is definitely the case. At the same time, I don't believe these 3 missions sharing similar traits is indicative of Infinity Ward running out of ideas, but rather quite the opposite. Instead, they flow incredibly smoothly into one another. Think about it. In Clean House, you are kept on a very tight leash, and there's only a few different ways you can influence events. The beginning of the Wolf's Den then gives you slightly more agency as you're able to move freely, and finally Going Dark opens things up completely. It is bookended by shorter, more linear sequences, but its most prominent section feels like a natural continuation of what came before. To say it's the end of a trilogy of sorts within Modern Warfare's campaign, I think is a fair assessment, and as such, it feels like much less of a one-off than those other missions I just mentioned, and much more like a deliberate escalation in terms of both gameplay and scale. Arriving at the clock tower, there's another hostage who needs to be rescued, and this is my favourite of the 3 locations. The pool did present you with options. You could head to the roof or deal with things at ground level, for example, but the clock tower is a much more interesting environment to explore. It has multiple floors, a lot of rooms, any of which could be housing one or more bad guys, and plenty of angles of approach to choose from on both the ground and second floors. I'd say it feels most like the building clearing sections seen during earlier missions, as you cautiously move from room to room while picking off or avoiding enemies. If you've taken out the lights, you should be able to make short work of them, but I sometimes prefer to leave them on to add an extra bit of excitement. Speaking of tension, Going Dark's sound design also shines brightest during this section and really adds to the whole affair. Assuming you've not alerted any guards, which will cause a frantic track to kick in, all you can hear are the creaks of the building, footsteps, and the sound of the hostage being interrogated as you move deeper inside the building. It's brilliantly unnerving. Locating the hostage, you'll again gain no new information.
Still no visual on Hadir. It's another hostage.
See if the...
I won't betray my family.
Shit, Captain. The hostage is a Barkov's family.
Barkov's men came into Hadir's house, and now he's in theirs. Get
get to the church now. If they have a hostage, he won't last long.
Leaving just one location remaining, the church. Making your way over there, you might fancy mixing things up and going loud. The truck patrolling the area can be taken down to make life a whole lot easier, although it will of course draw the attention of a lot of baddies. In fact, if you're feeling particularly bloodthirsty, you can take down basically every enemy in the level. Unlike a lot of other Call of Duty missions which do tend to railroad you, there's no right or wrong answer here. It might not seem like it, but Modern Warfare's gunplay is a vital part of making that possible. Because the time to kill is so low, stealth gameplay is completely viable in an open setting where you are able to recover from your mistakes if you react quickly enough. Combined with price giving you surprisingly accurate callouts depending on what's happening around you, it really does feel like you have the freedom to do whatever you want while the game reacts on the fly.
You got a target ahead of you. Good 9. Go kill.
Whether you want to channel your inner Sam Fisher and shoot lights out to create pathways across the estate, allowing you to slip by undetected without needing to kill anyone, or if you want to kill everyone, Going Dark has you covered. To enter the church, you'll need to slip in via the basement, although there is a neat detail I discovered here while trying things out. You'll find the doors to the building are locked, but if you bash one and then get to cover, a guard will open it to investigate, giving you an additional way of getting inside I'd wager most will have missed. Thankfully, the final hostage does have what you need.
Negative on idea.
Find out if the hostage gave up Barkov.
3rd floor, 451. 3rd floor, 451.
They broke him. He's saying 3rd floor, 451.
It's all we got to go on. Get to the top floor of the estate. I'll meet you there.
At which point it's time to head across to the as of yet unexplored main house. Oh, and it's also important to note here that while Going Dark does mix up the Call of Duty formula amazingly well, it does also stick to some established video game conventions. Whichever hostage you visit last will be the one who has the code. I would have loved the hostage with the code to have been designated to a location at random every time you play, so there was a chance you might find them in the first building you visit, or the second, or the third, but I'm sure the mission took a lot of work to create, so it's understandable Infinity Ward didn't want you to potentially finish the mission in record time. The main house can also be quite tricky to sneak inside, although you'll likely be okay if you take things slow, shooting out lights and guards well before you reach them. I didn't tend to actually look at the light meter all that much when exploring prior to arriving there, but it can be of huge help at this point given just how bright everything is. Meeting back up with Price, you use the code the final hostage gave you to enter Barkov's office, where you'll find Hadir.
Then help us. Please help my sister. Listen.
Get down!
And with a chopper now hot on your tail, Going Dark quickly slips back into the much more traditional Call of Duty mold. This section is fine, but I question whether it needed to be included at all. The rest of the mission is so wonderfully tense, and it almost feels as if Infinity Ward couldn't help but revert back to the norm. I think it's symptomatic of the identity crisis Modern Warfare struggles with at times. Much of the game is very grounded compared to some other titles in the series. Set pieces are often a bit more reserved, the time to kill is very short, making for more realistic gunplay, and the plot never goes too mad when compared to moments like the nuke in the original Modern Warfare, or quite a lot of Modern Warfare 3. But there are still quite a few scenes that barely toe the line between being realistic and being a bit too much, and for me this is definitely one of them. If Going Dark ended when you arrived at the office, I wouldn't complain. You'd have time to breathe out and really admire what you'd just played, which is awesome, rather than suddenly finding yourself in a quintessential Call of Duty set piece which doesn't do anything groundbreaking. It's not the end of the world, and it doesn't take the shine off what came before, but it does feel like it was included just in case, to remind you that Modern Warfare is a Call of Duty game where everything has to conclude in the most dramatic fashion. You might argue from a pacing perspective that it capitalises on the very quiet nature of what's come before, making its big bang all the more impactful, and while that is a valid opinion, it still feels unnecessary to me. To escape the chopper, you race to a nearby tunnel, at which point Going Dark reaches its end.
You helped me attack the lab, yes?
Not on your life. You're going down for this.
This was a one-way trip, Hadir. You knew that.
But you do the right thing, yes?
Boss, tell me we're gonna finish this.
We need support. Let's hope we get it.
I like to think of Going Dark as the climax to two different sets of levels. Within Modern Warfare itself, it's the end of a trilogy comprised of It, Clean House and The Wolf's Den, taking everything they did so well and moving it into a setting with far more freedom than almost any other Call of Duty mission around. Then, it's also a spiritual successor of sorts to All Gillied Up and Cliffhanger, mimicking the two-man setup of both while offering up far more options. When looking at it in either regard, it's hugely successful. It's a nerve-wracking experience that is much more tactical in nature than anything featured in the original Modern Warfare trilogy, and it also builds beautifully on the stealth mission at night concept shown off multiple times during Modern Warfare's campaign. Clean House may just edge it out as my favourite level in the game thanks to how ridiculously cinematic it manages to be, but in gameplay terms, no level can hold a candle to Going Dark. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and Elite Special Forces operatives. If you enjoyed it, do consider liking, subscribing and letting me know your thoughts, and hopefully we'll meet again soon.